Welcome back, students. Tonight, we will continue our study of microorganisms by investigating two more categories of microorganisms. They are the prokaryotes and the protists. We'll start with the prokaryotes. So, we've already seen this term prokaryotes in a previous lesson, but let's quickly review it. Prokaryotes are unicellular organisms that contain no membrane-bound nucleus and no organelles. All right, so none of these. Oops. Sorry about that. As we said previously, prokaryotes are the oldest life forms on the planet. They've been around for at least 3.5 billion years. And so because they're our first life forms, they're also our simplest life forms. So if prokaryotes are so simple, why do we care so much about them? Well, first of all, prokaryotes are everywhere. This includes in our air, in the soil, in our water. Essentially, prokaryotes can be found on every surface, on every organism, and in every environment on Earth. Even right now, as you sit and take notes in this lecture, prokaryotes are in the air you're breathing. They're on your skin. They're inside your mouth and your digestive system. They're even on your keyboard and in your food and throughout your house. The prokaryotes that inhabit every corner of our planet are, in fact, very, very diverse. Not only do they vary in terms of their shapes, and we see a couple of those here. We see some rod-shaped prokaryotes, some spiral-shaped prokaryotes. Here are rod-shaped prokaryotes. These are an example of some spiral-shaped prokaryotes. Some come in spherical forms like these here. So not only are they diverse in terms of their shape, but their genetic content and their structures and functions actually are very diverse as well. They're so diverse, in fact, that prokaryotes actually occupy 2 of the 3 domains that all of life are classified into. Those 2 domains that prokaryotes fit into are called bacteria and archaea. Of these 2, bacteria are more common and scientists are much more familiar with them. Archaea, on the other hand, are found in such extreme environments such as hot springs and salt lakes and hydrothermal vents that it's only recently that scientists have begun to understand more about them. Interestingly, according to DNA evidence, eukaryotes, like us humans, are actually more closely related to the extreme archaea than we are to bacteria. All right, so we've covered our first 2 categories of microorganisms, the viruses, which we studied last time, and prokaryotes, which we just reviewed. So now let's turn our attention to the last category, which is the protists. Protists can be defined as the simplest eukaryotes. Now remember from a previous lesson that the cells of eukaryotes are different than the cells of prokaryotes because they do contain both a nucleus and complex organelles. Thus, as eukaryotes, protists represent a step above prokaryotes in terms of complexity and evolution. You can actually see this in the pictures within the table below. The organisms represented, although simple compared to organisms like humans or ostriches or spiders, they still look quite a bit more complex than just simple bacteria. In fact, these organisms are classified into the domain Eukarya, along with all the fungi and plants and animals, instead of in the domains of bacteria and archaea that we discussed on the last slide. Interestingly, while most protists are unicellular, there are some species of protists that are actually multicellular, such as the kelp you see in the table below. All right, so something unique and memorable about the kingdom that protists fit into, which we call kingdom Protista, is that taxonomists have historically had trouble coming up with characteristics that unite and define this group. In fact, scientists often refer to this group as the trash can kingdom, meaning that eukaryotes do not fully fit, meaning that protists, meaning that eukaryotes that do not fully fit the requirements of the animal kingdom or the plant kingdom or the fungal kingdom are actually thrown in together into this protist group. So, what kinds of organisms are considered protists? First, we have organisms that we call animal-like protists. These are organisms like the paramecium that you see here, or this amoeba, that actually have some of the characteristics that animals have, such as being heterotrophs or being able to move. However, these organisms do not meet all of the qualifications needed to be considered true animals. So instead, we call them animal-like protists. Another name for animal-like protists that you'll see in scientific study is protozoans. Next, we have the plant-like protists. These organisms, like the Euglenia you see here, and also the kelp that we mentioned earlier, are organisms that have some characteristics that plants also have, such as the ability to perform photosynthesis. However, they do not share all of the characteristics that are needed to be considered a true plant. Plant-like protists are also referred to by the term algae. Finally, fungus-like protists, like the ones you see here, share some characteristics with fungi, like being able to externally digest and then absorb nutrients. However, just like in our other cases, the fungus-like protists do not share all the characteristics that must be met to be considered a true fungus, and so therefore they're called fungus-like protists. Some examples are the slime mold that you see here and the water mold that you see helping to decompose the fish there. All right, we'll end tonight with a conversation about infectious diseases. Let's start by introducing the term pathogen, which is simply a microorganism that causes disease. So this could be bacteria, it could be viruses, these could be protists. All three of the categories of microorganisms that we studied could be possibly pathogenic or considered pathogens. Many of the significant diseases that afflict the human race, as well, of course, as other species, are caused by pathogens. An especially important category of disease caused by pathogens are what we call infectious diseases. Infectious disease is one that can be spread from one organism to another. Before we continue, I want to pause to remind you that not all microorganisms are pathogens. Some microorganisms are pathogens, but many others are harmless, and some microorganisms are even beneficial to us and our environment. And we'll actually talk about those next time. Second, not all diseases are infectious. Some diseases are, and we're going to focus on infectious diseases because they have the potential to be very devastating. But many other diseases cannot be transferred from one organism to the next. Some examples of some non-infectious diseases would include things like cancer, diabetes, and allergies. Okay, back to infectious diseases. I've listed some infectious diseases you may be familiar with by category below. Read through these lists and see if you recognize any of them. You may notice that some have mild effects, like the common cold, while others have the potential to cause worldwide destruction, things like Ebola and bubonic plague. In tomorrow's lecture, we will discuss more about the transmission and prevention of infectious diseases. All right, that's it for tonight. I'll see you in class tomorrow.